Okay, when I put myself on speaker view, can you see anything different? Did you guys see any change on the screen, on your screens?
No.
No. Okay, perfect.
You can spotlight yourself, and that
Right.
would make you big and everybody else small or invisible.
Right, exactly. By putting myself on speaker view, so when people watch this video afterwards, so they basically just see me.
That I'm not sure about.
Yeah, no, that's what happens. I checked it out because people were saying it's so busy to have, people that weren't coming to the class but were watching the video. So they're just saying, and all of my videos, they're just saying that it's too busy. So I flipped it this way, and it seems to work. Okay, today is I would say, is probably one of my favorite psukim in Tanakh, but it's got a lot of competition. But it's an incredible pasuk. It's also with our mamish, with our eyes, we get to see how what we spoke about in the introduction comes to life. What do I mean? In the introduction, we spoke about a mashal umelitza, right? We said that in pasuk Vav, we said lahavin mashal umelitza, to understand mashal umelitza, and we gave a lot of explanations of what mashal umelitza is. One of them is that not only the mashal itself, but the melitza, the vehicle that was being used for the mashal, and that some of the side points are also important. And when you darshan, when you explain and you understand Tanakh, you can't, especially the Sefer Mishlei, you can't just understand the pasuk itself. You have to sometimes look at context of the pasuk. You also have to look at what the pasuk is not saying, and you have to look at the implications of the pasuk. There's so much more than just the actual message of the pasuk. So I want to take a look at this pasuk Ches, verse 8. I want to take a look at that in really both contexts. So the pasuk is a very simple pasuk, and it follows. If you remember, I told you that there was a rhythm of Sefer Mishlei, so it follows the rhythm of Sefer Mishlei. Shma b'ni Mussar Avicha, Titosh Toras Imecha, da 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 da, and that the two sides are contrasted to each other. We have the Avicha on the one side, and we have the Imecha on the other. We have the Shma versus Titosh. We have the Mussar versus Toras. So there's obviously something in all of that also. Very simply, if you were just reading Bible, which I never advocate because it doesn't mean what it says, but when you just read this, just read the text, what's the message that you're getting from Shlomo Melech? Which I think is a very critical message, which is one of the beautiful things of this pasuk. Listen to your parents. We have a lot about children, about parents parenting their children, of how they should parent their children, what they should say to their children. Teach them on the road, teach them in the house, teach them at every opportunity. You take them to the zoo, teach them. You take them out in the fields, teach them. You take them for a vacation, teach them. There's so much to learn from the parent to the child, but we don't find as much of an admonition to a child that a child has to be open to the teachings of his parent, to recognize that you're going to be searching your whole life for truth. Very often, the place where you're going to find that truth in the clearest, strongest fashion is going to be coming from your parents. And I say this actually in an incredible way, that not only from religious parents, but very often when a person is about tshuva, their parents didn't live necessarily those kinds of lives unless their parents lived, lives of total decadence and complete immorality, then the values that they had came from their parents. And the values that their parents had came from the Torah. 2 generations, I'll go back 3 generations. But you're not going to find somebody, you usually will not find somebody who'll say, I come from 20 generations of apostates. Right? More often than not, it's 2 or 3 generations like that, but it's not much more than that. The values, ultimately, the Jewish values, are ultimately coming from the Torah and ultimately coming from our ancestors, and it seeps through. So we don't recognize them as Jewish values, we just recognize them as values. But at the end of the day, they are Jewish values. I remember once talking to a person, and I was wondering where they got their sense of, they're a very, very beautiful person, and wondering where they got their sense of morality from. I knew their parents weren't religious. And they said they got it from the Torah. So I said, but your parents weren't religious. Like, how did they teach you that? No, these were my parents' values. But my parents' values are the values of the Torah, though they didn't keep any of it. None of it was really important to them, but that's where their values came from. So I think that on the simplest level, what the Torah is, what Shlomo Melech is telling us is, Shma b'ni Mussar Avicha v'Titosh Toras Imecha, without looking at the words of the pasuk in too much detail. What Shlomo Melech is saying is, listen to your parents. Look at your parents' lives. There's so much to be able to learn from them. On Yom Kippur and the other holidays, but especially on Yom Kippur, when we say Yizkar, what are we supposed to be thinking? It's not just, I miss my mom and dad, or I miss my siblings or spouse or children. It can't be that, because it's not. Those are not days of mourning. If that was the case, we would, maybe put it on Tisha B'Av. We should do Yizkar also, because we know that we go to cemeteries on Tisha B'Av. So maybe we should also say Yizkar. It's not about mourning. I think it's about, especially when you look at Yom Kippur, you look at the context of the day. It's a day of really trying to get in touch with ourselves. If you're going to get in touch with yourself, you got to go back to your past. You got to go back to your parents and your grandparents and your great-grandparents, and understand that that's part of you. That's part of where you come from. That's part of the good stuff you've learned. It might be part of the negative stuff you've learned also. But if you're trying to cleanse yourself and trying to uproot certain things on Yom Kippur, so then it is only logical to bring out the examples of people who lived incredible lives and who did accomplish incredible things, and use the kodes that God gave them, and that's and gave us so incredibly much. By the way, just as we hear, what's the essence of Yizkar? The essence of Yizkar is not those words, Yizkar Elokim es Avi Meri Imi Merasi. That's not the essence of Yizkar. The essence of Yizkar is when we say, and I pledge on their behalf. That's actually the most important part of Yizkar. And if you're not going to pledge, don't say that. Now, you know that I'm not collecting money. It's not it's not a pitch, right? This is going to do with me. But that's the most important part. Pledging money on Tisha B'Av. I'm sorry, Yom Kippur, or when you say Yizkar is the most important part. Because what does that statement make? Here you are standing saying Yizkar. I remember my mom and dad. I remember all the people around me that love me and that I loved. And then on behalf of that, I give charity on their behalf. Why is that thrown in there? Look what you left in this world, mom and dad. You left somebody who still cares about giving tzedakah. You left somebody who's not just focused on themselves. They're thinking about other people, other institutions, about other things also carrying on. That's the greatest memorial for our parents. That's what the pasuk is saying. Shma b'ni Mussar Avicha v'Titosh Toras Imecha. Listen to the messages that you got from your parents. Listen to them. The Torah, the Mussar. Listen to the instruction that they gave you, the facts, the basis, the whole foundation of what they gave you. Listen to that, because that's important. In order to have proper chinuch, you need to have good parents, but you need to also have good children. You need to be a good child. You need to be somebody who's open to listen to their parents. And that's what the pasuk is saying. Okay. That was number one. Another thing that I see in this pasuk, before I get to the main message of the pasuk, another thing I see in this pasuk, by the way, and that connects it back to the previous pasuk, because the previous pasuk, Yiras Hashem Reishis Das, Chachma Mussar Avilim Bazu. Who's that pasuk talking about? Clearly, God. Okay, and then in the pasuk Shma b'ni Mussar Avicha, talking about dad, Titosh Toras Imecha, talking about mom. So we have to understand that we have three partners that are involved in our creation. The Gemara says, and the Gemara defines very clearly, which genes come from the mom, which genes come from the dad, and that the ruach, the spirit of a person, the very life of a person, that comes from God. So we understand that there are three partners in a person's creation. That's why the mitzvah, and by the way, it's very appropriate to talk about, because in this week's parsha is the mitzvah of Kabed Esavicha V'Yasemecha. Right, in this week's parsha is the Ten Commandments. So once again, with the second set of Ten Commandments that Moshe talked about, that he got after the destruction of the first set. That's in this week's parsha, this coming week's parsha. That's Chanon. So Moshe said. So the Torah says Kabed Esavicha V'Yasemecha, and that's number 5. When you look at the 10 Commandments, you see 10 Commandments, 5 of them on one side of the luchos, 5 on the other luchos, and the ones on the one side are between us and God. The ones on the other side are between us and man. Well, that works out okay as long as you start from number one. Number one is, believe in God. Number two is no gods before, no idolatry. Number three is don't take my name in vain. Number four is keep Shabbos. All about God. Great, wonderful. Then number five, honor your mother and your father. That's not about God. That's about my parents. And then don't kill, don't steal, don't commit adultery, don't lie about other people in court, and don't be jealous. Those are clearly between man and man. But number five is a problem because number five is really between us and man. So it should really be 4 on the one side and 6 on the other side. I mean, I'm not great at math, but I know that that's the way it should split itself up, right? You put 4 on the one side, 6 on the other side. It'll be a little uneven, but if you make the letters bigger, it'll be fine. Like, knows why we say, like we say it so emphatically, that, this is the stuff between man and God, and this is stuff between man and man. Because number 5 is actually transition. Number 5 is both. Number 5 is definitely man to man, which we understand because that's talking about, human parents, but it's also man to God. Because ultimately, when we honor our parents, we are honoring God. Because God is also a partner in our creation. If it wasn't for God, we wouldn't be here. If it wasn't for our parents, we wouldn't be here either. But if it wasn't for God putting in his material into this creation, then we wouldn't be here. That's why God is able to say, honor, the whole world is about God. So why does God say, honor your mother and father? Ultimately, what God really wants to say is, honor me. Recognize where you come from. Where you come from is you come from God. You're connected to God. But that's one of the ways you recognize you're coming from God. One of the ways you recognize you're coming from God is you recognize your parents. Because ultimately, where did your parents come from? Go back. Ultimately, they came from Adam. And Adam comes from God. So ultimately, it all comes back to God. I think I've said this before, but when the first commandment came, the nations of the world thought we're dealing with an egomaniac. I am the Lord your God who took you out of Egypt. Okay, what else did you do great? I was like, I'm great, and I'm really great, and I hope you think that I'm great. Like, really? That's the first commandment? And then what's the second commandment? You shall have no other gods before me, because I'm great. And then the third commandment, keep my Sabbath, because don't take my name in vain. Don't take my name in vain, because you don't want to waste my name. And then the fourth commandment, keep my Sabbath. They looked at them and they said, this guy's an egomaniac. It's with this God. It's all about himself. It's all about give me honor. Right? Bless me, pray to me, keep my Shabbos, think about me all the time. Wow, this guy's a little off. And then he says, honor your mother and father. And then they realize, whoa, God is amazing. Because God is so comfortable that God says he has no problem me mechalik kavod, giving honor to somebody else, saying you give honor to your parents, because he knows ultimately that where is that honor going to lead? That honor is going to lead back to God. And therefore, one part of this mitzvah of honoring parents is really ben adam lamakom, between us and God. And that's why the mitzvah is on that side of the 10 Commandments. But it transitions into the next side because it also has a component of it that is ben adam lamakom, between us and between us and other people. So that's the flow between pasuk zayin and pasuk ches. These are the first 2 mussars, right? These are the first 2 statements that Shlomo Melech is making. It's not 2 statements; it's 1 statement. What Shlomo Melech is telling us is that there are 3 that are responsible for your existence in this world. Stay connected to all 3. Yiras Hashem Reishis Das. First thing you got to know is that there's God. And now you can move on. Shma b'ni Mussar Avicha Titosh Imecha. Don't ignore your mom and your dad. Amazing. Okay, but we have a real major problem here. I have other things that I really want to say, but I want to keep this line for a moment. We have a major problem. The major problem in this pasuk is that message, by the way, that's a very valuable message. Listen to your parents. You get everything you need from your parents. Sometimes you have to augment it a little bit with stuff you learn in school. Sometimes you have to ignore the stuff you learned in school and actually listen to your parents because they know better. But you got to get it. You got to get it from both places. Okay, great. Like, it's a great message, and I would be very comfortable with saying that this is the way the book of Mishlei started, and this is what we're supposed to learn from the beginning of the book of Mishlei. There's only one small problem. There's got to be another message here, because when Shlomo HaMelech writes this, he writes, "Listen to the Mussar of your father, and don't deviate, right? Don't forsake the Torah of your mother." Now, if I had to attach Torah to one of my parents, it would probably be to my father. And if I had to attach Mussar, which is direction and guidance, I would probably attach that to my mother. So why is it Shma b'ni Mussar Avicha? I would think Shma b'ni Toras Avicha. Val Titosh Mussar Imecha. You also have to wonder why It's Shma B'ni. And this we're going to do a lot when we look at the Psukim. When Shlomo Melech uses a word to describe something, and then he uses on the second half of the pasuk another word to almost describe the same thing, but it's a different word. You have to wonder why the two different words, why this one attached to the first half and this one attached to the second half. The Vilna Gaon looks at Mishlei this way through these kinds of eyes. But Shma B'ni Mussar Avicha. So why is Mussar about Shma, and why is Torah about Lo Titosh? Don't run away. Don't forsake. Okay. I mentioned that this week's Pasha, we also have the mitzvah of honoring your parents. In truth, first, what is the mitzvah of honoring your parents? You can write it down and see if you're right when I tell you what the answer is. What is the real mitzvah of honoring your parents? Gratitude. It's gratitude, saying thank you. Gratitude for what? Oh, well, they helped me buy a house. They helped me get a car. They put me through school. They fed me. They put up with me. That I have to say, like, I have to shout thank you. No. The thank you is not for all of any of that. You have to say thank you, but that's not what the mitzvah of Kibbut Avayim is about. The mitzvah of Kibbut Avayim is about the fact they gave you life. The fact they brought you into this world. Even if they didn't do much with you after that. Even if they didn't raise you necessarily in a way that was so magnificent and appropriate, the fact that they gave you the gift of life, that's what the mitzvah of Kabbalas Avicha v'Imecha is all about. And we actually say that in this week's Pasha. Well, the first time we see the commandment, it just says Kabbalas Avicha v'Imecha, l'man yirichim yimecha la'adama, you honor your mother and father so that your days should be lengthened on this world. Great. And why will your days be lengthened if you honor your mother and father? Because if you can appreciate them, you can live with appreciation, you live a much happier, longer life. That's what Torah is telling us. You want to fill your life with meaning, so then be a grateful person. Okay. Which, by the way, just gives me like a parenthesis, a quick commercial. I just want to say thank you to everybody for what you gave me at the party. It was magnificent, really, really incredible. And just wanted to just share my appreciation. Okay, back to the regular scheduled program. So with your parents, there has to be a sense of gratitude, and gratitude is what gives you a long life. It gives you you appreciate life, and every day is another thing to appreciate. It's like amazing, wonderful. Okay, but look at this week's Pasha. This week we have extra words in the Torah, extra words in the Ten Commandments. So that brings up a whole nother story. Maybe I'll talk about it on Thursday. Was that in the second set of, was that in the first set of 10 commandments or not? In other words, did it say these extra words or not say these extra words? It's like a little weird. Okay, be that as it may, the extra words are, Kasha tzivcha Hashem lekecha. You have to honor your parents like the Lord your God has commanded you. But wait a second. The Lord your God commanded you 613 commandments. Why doesn't it say that by every mitzvah in the Torah? Do this mitzvah, Kasha tzivcha Hashem lekecha, like the Lord your God commanded you. Okay, keep Shabbos like the Lord your God commanded you. Keep kosher like the Lord your God commanded you. But it doesn't say that. Dafka, by the honoring of parents, it says, Kasha tzivcha Hashem lekecha, like the Lord your God commanded you. Because the word like doesn't mean as God has commanded you, but like means literally the way that God commanded you the first time, that's the way you have to honor your parents. What were the conditions under which God gave us that mitzvah of honoring parents? So if you think about it very carefully, the mitzvah of honoring parents was given to us at a time when our parents had done very little for us. Think about it. In Egypt, they didn't have the means really to take much care of us. It wasn't like, mom was schlepping us all over the place. There was no extracurricular activities in Mitzrayim, right? It's not like we went to, after school chugim or summer camp. They weren't doing any of that kind of stuff. So what did our parents give us? When we left Mitzrayim, our parents weren't feeding us. God was feeding us. When we were trekking in the desert, our clothes didn't wear out, so our parents weren't taking us shopping, and they weren't buying us new clothes. They weren't getting us new shoes because we didn't need that. They didn't have to fend off the scorpions and the snakes because there were no scorpions and snakes in the desert because I know it was a desert, but there were clouds that were covering us. So we didn't have any of this stuff. So what were our parents doing for us? Literally, they were doing nothing for us. God was taking care of us. Nevertheless, God said, honor your parents, dafka, under these conditions, because it's not about what they gave you. It's about the fact they gave you the gift of life. And therefore, like it was at the time that God commanded you, standing at the foot of Mount Sinai, that your parents had really not done anything to you yet, and yet God said, honor them. That's the way we always have to honor them. That it's not about what they give us. It's about recognizing that our very lives are here because of them. That the very fact that we exist in this world, it has nothing to do if they give us a lot of money, a little money, if they gave us good material things, not such good material things, if they give us healthy emotional things or not healthy emotional things, and we're still working on our regressional therapy to try to fix up all of that stuff. That's got nothing to do with it. At the end of the day, we have an obligation, and the obligation to kabed is kasha tzivcha Hashem l'kecha, exactly the way it was when God gave you the commandment, not because of any stuff, just because of the gift of life. But that's not the only mitzvah that God gave us about parents. Kabed is avicha v'yasimecha, and es Hashem l'kecha tiru. I'm sorry, ish imo v'aviv tiru. It says every man, his mother and his father, he should fear. That's a separate commandment in the Torah given in Parshas Kedoshim. And there, in that pasuk, it says an amazing thing. Every man, his mother and his father, he should fear. And then the next words in the pasuk are, and keep my Sabbath. What? What does Shabbos have to do with honoring parents? You could spare God a period. You could spare it. It's okay. You don't even put periods in your Torah, so it's fine. You could separate the two pasukim. You don't have to make them one pasuk. There's no economy. What are you mishing in things? Misharayim, two different things. What are you doing that for? What is kabed is avicha v'yaseh? What is ish imo v'aviv tiro? Every man, his mother's father, he should fear. He should be in awe of them. What does that have to do with v'yasab shosai tishmoru? And you should keep my Sabbaths. So without spending too much time on it, there's a very important drasha here. Our rabbis learned that when is your obligation to fear your parents, that obligation, and to honor them. When is that obligation? Only if they tell you as SHABBOS TABLE, if they tell you to honor the Shabbos. But if they tell you to go against God's Torah, so then your obligation to listen to them is over. Your obligation to listen to them is tied into their connection to God and to His Torah. But if they don't connect themselves to God and His Torah, now you still have an obligation to listen to them. But if they tell you to do something that is against that which God says, something that is against halacha, something that is against the Torah, so then you no longer have an obligation. But you don't have an obligation to fear them, which is to follow them. But honor wasn't linked to that, because you still have an obligation to honor them. You still have an obligation to talk to them in a menschlich way and to speak to them in the way that's appropriate. Okay, quickly, what's the difference between honor and fear? Honor are the positive things that we have to do to enhance the life of our parents. We have to take them in and out. We have to walk them. We have to provide for them. We have to take care of them. We could do that with their own money, but nevertheless, we have to give them our time. We have to give them our love. That's what kabed is avicha v'yasimecha. Ish imo v'aviv tiro. Every man is mother's father. He should fear. That means that he should not do things that take away from their honor. That you can't contradict them. You can't sit in their seat. You can't call them by the first name. You can't say things that are disrespectful for them. When you're talking in a group and the parent says, yeah, we were on this particular highway, you can't say, no, we were on the other highway. There's only a very precise way that it can be done, because you can't contradict your parent. All of that is part of taking away from their cover, taking away from their honor. And that's what ish imo v'aviv tiro, that you have to have a sense of fear. When we talk about God also with kavod and yira, I know I'm packing a lot into this, but when we talk about kavod and yira, we talk about honor and fear about God. So there also we're talking about positive and negative. Positive commandments, negative commandments, the same thing over here. When we talk about kavod and yira, so we're talking about the positive commandments, negative commandments. Okay, but now to the point that I wanted to make. Look at it very carefully. Kabed es avicha v'yasimecha. Who's listed first? Dad. Ish imo v'aviv tiro. Who's listed first? Mom. Wait a second. Why are you listing mom and dad in different orders? When it comes to the mitzvah of kavod, so there we list dad first. When it comes to the mitzvah of fear, there we list mom first. What's going on? So what's going on is this: naturally, in a natural family, in a standard family, right? Conventional wisdom, things that normally happen, the way it is, the dad is a little bit tougher than the mom. The mom, because mom is rachmanis. That's what moms are. That's what women are. They're rachmanis. They're the female side of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is the side of rachamim and of chesed. And therefore, normally the tougher one, the year. Remember, we spoke about last week the concept of written Torah, oral Torah. So normally, it's the dad that's a little bit tougher. When it comes to kavod, which is really very close to love, when it comes to that, it's natural that you're going to feel that way to your mom. And that's why the Torah says, Avicha, Imecha. Don't forget about that. When it comes to yira, when it comes to, tzitring and you got this, worried about, who's gonna discipline you. So that's very often the dad. And therefore, by him, naturally, you'll have a sense of yira, a sense of awe. And that's why the Torah says, ish, imay v'aviv tiro, starts with imay, starts with his mother. Because the mother, naturally, you would not necessarily feel that kind of awe to. And the Torah says, don't forget your mom. So the Torah tells us the opposite one for each one of them. In other words, when it comes to kavod, it accentuates the one you wouldn't have the kavod for. When it comes to yira, it accentuates the one you wouldn't have the yira for. So then I look at this pasuk and I say to myself, maybe that's what this pasuk is saying. Shma b'ni Mussar Avicha. The Torah of your father, that's Pashat. That's Pashat, the teacher, the one who's going to teach you. The father is going to sit with the child. He's going to learn Chumash, he's going to learn Gemara. He's going to deepen the knowledge of the child. That's obvious. But the father also directs. The father also loves. The father also guides. And therefore, Shlomo Melech says, Shma b'ni Mussar Avicha. Don't forget about the Mussar of your father. The Mussar of your mother is the Mussar of your mother is obvious. But don't forget about the Mussar of your father. And Torah, the Torah comes from dad. Mom tries to say about Torah, maybe we won't take her so seriously. Maybe we'll look at her and say, wow, mom is so filled with so much Torah knowledge. She's filled with so much Torah understanding. Comes along Shlomo Melech and says, the Mussar of your mom, we know you're going to take, but don't forget don't forget the Torah of your mother also, because she's got valuable things to say. Not just wise things, not just wise guidance, but when you listen to her explain the Torah, when you listen to her feel about the Torah, you listen to her expound on the Torah, listen to that because she's got something to say to you also. Shma b'ni Mussar Avicha also, Shma al Titosh Toras Imecha also, which means that it's really what Shlomo Melech is telling us is that listen to the Torah and the Mussar of both of your parents. Because even though one of them seems to excel in this and one of them seems to excel in this, in their secondary discipline, in their secondary ability, they also have the ability to impart the other two. Listen to all their messages. Don't discount any of their messages because what they have to say to you is valuable. I got through about a half of what I wanted to get through. I still have a little bit more on this pasuk, and I think that I will do that tomorrow. I thought this would be a one-day pasuk, but looks like it's going to be two, and it's fine because we still have to talk about Shma versus Titosh, and then there's still some other Rabbi that we have to see, and then one amazing Meiri. Okay, awesome. We'll stop here. Everybody should have a beautiful, wonderful, amazing, awesome day.
Rabbi, just a quickie, please.
Sure.
You said that we're grateful to our parents for life, not for stuff. I think that's a direct quote. Then we're talking about parents relating to Torah, parents relating to Mussar. How do you reconcile?
That's life.
So Torah and Mussar is life.
It's life. Because I can breathe it into your nose. But if I don't tell you how to use it, then I've given you an albatross around your neck. I've given you nothing. So that is also part of the giving of life.
Okay, now and a very personal anecdote. It's a very brutal statement, but as far as I know, I received no Yiddishkeit, obvious Yiddishkeit from my parents.
So I'm trying to stick my finger inside of that and to readjust that and to say that you don't even realize the kind of Yiddishkeit that you got from your parents.
Well, that's why I said I modified that because just being in a Jewish household, even one with very little level of observance, there's some level of Yiddishkeit.
That's correct.
But just we never had a Shabbat together. My father worked every Friday and every Shabbat. We never had a Shabbat meal together.
Right.
Okay,
and there's no question that none of your love of Shabbat came from there. There's no question. It didn't come from there. It came from rabbis, teachers, experiences, no question about it. But there is more to Jewish life than just Shabbat.
Obviously.
There is menschlichkeit at the root of all of that. And that menschlichkeit That's where you got it from.
Correct. Agreed. Thank you, Rabbi.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. I think that just drove the point home. That was the Melitza, right? That just drove the point home. Beautiful. Okay.
Okay, guys. Have a great day.
Wonderful,
Thanks,
amazing
Rabbi.
day.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good day, everyone.
Have a good day.
Thank you. Thank you. Have a great day. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
This will be up a little bit later because I missed the end.
Say it one more time.
Will this be up a little bit later so I can catch the end? I missed the end. I got a phone call I had to take.
No problem. This will be up, I would say, in probably, I have to wait for my son to wait. My son's in America for the summer, so I got to wait for him to wake up, put a thumbnail on it, and then stick it on the YouTube site. So it's usually about 6-7 hours from now it'll get up.
I won't get to it till before then.
Okay, perfect. Perfect.
Thanks.
And it will be Mishlei 9. It'll be Shir 9.
Perfect. Thanks.
Okay.